So I was looking at the app I like to use to find free stuff when I saw the ad for this Ryobi string trimmer. But that did get me wondering, why would they give it away? Was it broken, or maybe it just needs some TLC and it'll be good again? It's too bad they didn't mention anything about its condition, because it just means we'll have to put some work into it just to find out what they probably already know. In today's video, we're going to be looking at this Ryobi 4-cycle string trimmer. And the problem is that we don't know anything about it, but by the duct tape that's wrapped around the fuel cap, it's probably not going to be good news. The first thing that we're going to do is look around the machine and see if there's anything else broken or needs attention. And besides a missing guard for the trimmer head, it looks pretty good. However, the fuel lines and purge bulb might need replacing before it gets worse. So the first time we inspected the engine oil, come to find out there was hardly anything in there. So I put some used oil into the engine, however I didn't measure exactly how much I put into it. This will be important later on, but for right now, we're going to look at the fuel tank and see if the fuel filter is still connected, which it was. Because if the filter was not connected and loose, the carb might be clogged with debris, which could keep the engine from starting. Next, we'll put some fresh fuel from my squirt bottle into the tank, then purge the air from the system and see if we can get it to start. And the first good sign is that the bulb is filling with fuel, but if it didn't do that, the chances of the engine starting would be very low. And after looking at the instructions on the cover, we'll then try starting it. So it did not start, which is not good news, but to keep from flooding the engine, we'll try it again without the choke. So unfortunately, it did not start, but the instructions don't say what to do in this situation. What I'm going to do now is physically prime the engine with fuel from my squirt bottle instead. Now that we know that it does run, let's see what happens if we try starting it again. So the good news was that after priming it and getting the engine to at least cough for us, it was able to start on its own. But the bad news is that there's too much oil in the engine, so we'll have to empty it and eventually put the correct amount back into it. Just remember, all engines will consume some amount of oil, and over a long period of time, that oil level could get dangerously low. But while in this position, we found out that the fuel cap is also leaking, so we might have to consider replacing it. But as you can see, the fuel is coming out of the opening for the tank vent, which means we might be able to fix it. But before we do anything else, I'm going to measure out the correct amount of oil this time and pour it into the engine. Just remember to read your owner's manual for your specific engine, because it might be different from this one. So did somebody give away a working machine? I don't think so. I'll remind you that this engine did not start on its own, and it was only after we coaxed it to run did it start on its own. I will let you know that I've started this engine several more times off camera since getting it running. And it's consistently started and ran each and every time, so I'm confident that it's now working as it should be. So what's the plan then? Well, we already changed the oil and we're going to give it a quick cleaning. What's next? So what's next is to replace the perishable parts of the fuel system, which are the fuel lines and the bulb. I also wouldn't mind checking out the grease in the gearbox for the trimmer head as well. So here's something a bit embarrassing. I was planning to take off the filter base to make filming just a bit easier. However, the bolts were glued in place and I didn't want a chance damaging the heads. So I guess we'll have to leave it in place, which will make things a bit tougher to see, but it should be okay. First, we'll disconnect the emissions hose and move it out of the way. We'll then disconnect the very discolored fuel lines from the carb. Now if you need to, you can make a mental note as to which one was connected to the filter and which one wasn't. But if you don't want to, we'll talk about which line goes to which port on the carb later on. So it turns out these fuel lines are not that bad at all, but once they start to discolor like these are, replacing them with new ones just means they'll last even longer than the ones that were already on there. Now the real surprise shows up, however, after taking the fuel filter out, because it turns out it's a different fuel line. I'm not sure how they managed to do this, but if I had to guess, they probably used the wire method to pull this hodgepodge into the fuel tank. Now this fuel line does not appear to be the original one, and it looks to be in excellent condition, which just means we can reuse it. If, however, the metal part on yours is breaking down with signs of corrosion, then you might want to consider replacing it. After cutting the end of the new fuel line at an angle, we'll push as much as we can into the opening of the tank. You can choose as to which one you want to make the filter line. There is no set way. I do have to let you know that this was very difficult to do because of the shape of the fuel tank. So if I had to do this again, I'd probably use the wire method to install the new lines. After cutting the angle piece off, we'll install the fuel filter and then carefully locate the filter inside the tank. If the filter is too far forward or too far back in the fuel tank, you'll have problems using all the fuel inside it. So on this one, I like to locate the filter at the front of the lowest part of the fuel tank. After getting the filter installed, we'll then use the same method for the fuel return line, except we won't need to install a filter. Just take your time and make sure there's at least 1 inch of return line inside the tank to keep it from backing out. And once you're done, it should look something like this inside the fuel tank. Now, to be completely honest, it might be easier taking the fuel tank off to do this. So next step, we'll take out the fasteners holding the plate for the bulb and then take out the bulb and replace it. Just be careful because these come in 2 sizes and you'll need to pick the right one, unless that is you order a variety pack instead. And on this one, you'll need the smaller of the 2, but it is possible to force the larger one to work. So I have done this decades ago when I first started doing this, but I would not recommend it. So when connecting the fuel lines, the filter line will connect to the brass port closer to the bulb. That of course means the return line will connect to the brass port further away from the bulb. And don't worry, we'll confirm that this is the correct way when we do our flow test. So when pressing on the bulb, fuel will come up the filter line, then enter the carb, and then fill the bulb, and then go back to the fuel tank through the return line. And as you just saw, fuel is flowing through the lines just like it's supposed to. But if you don't see any fuel getting to the carb, then there might be something wrong with either the carb or the fuel filter. Also, if the fuel is flowing backwards, then you'll need to swap the lines around. So we're almost ready to start the engine, but there is one last item we need to look at, and that's the grease in the gearbox. Now, I'm not going to tell you how often you need to check this, so you'll have to make that call yourself. But to be honest, I don't know if you could ever service this too much. Now there is grease in there, and even though it looks okay, I'm still going to add some to it. They do make a specific grease to put in here, but I'm just going to add what I have on hand. If you decide to look up the kind you need for your machine, that's great, but for me, this is the choice I'm making. Once we tighten the bolt down for the grease, I think it's time to start the engine and make sure we didn't mess something up. So I'm quite happy with how this project has turned out, but we still need to hold on to it for a bit and use it several more times until we're certain it's going to work well. I will say that 4-cycle machines are not as finicky as the 2-stroke ones, so this might go up for sale sooner than later. The best part is that this is a straight shaft, but also takes attachments, which should make it an easy sale. That and the service we just gave it should make the buyer a lot more likely to buy it. I know mixing oil and gasoline is a huge hassle that some consumers just don't want to mess with, so this should be an easy sale. So my question is, would you buy something like this if it was cheap enough, or would you pick a better brand? Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions about this project or about your own projects, and I hope to see you in the next video.